I'm Leslie Rogers, an artist living in Detroit. I grew up studying quilting, and then later in life, I was a puppeteer. My degrees are in sculpture and fine art and things like that. The point of my project here was to work on this floating quilt. And the quilt is going to be stuffed with this milkweed floss, this fluffy white stuff that I've been processing here. Because the milkweed floss was foraged in Western Michigan for flotation devices for life vests during World War II, when the US's supply of kapok fiber was cut off due to war with Japan, because kapok came from East Asia. Kapok fiber and milkweed fiber are very similar, and they're both extremely buoyant. So when I learned that milkweed floss was buoyant, my first thought was, can I put it in a quilt? And can I put enough of it in the quilt that I could float on the quilt? So here my goal was make this quilt, separate and process all this milkweed, and stuff the quilt with the milkweed so that I can float on. It was a really good opportunity for me to focus because you have an isolated experience if you want one. You know, you live in a house all by yourself. You kind of come and go as you please. Nobody's really structuring much of anything that you need to do. But also, if I wander into town, I'm gonna bump into somebody and then see them again the next day. And if you meet somebody, they'll be like, how much longer are you here for? And if you say 2 weeks, they're like, oh, I don't need to say goodbye. I'll see you again and again. And then you will see them again and again. So many people were really warm and welcoming, very curious about what we're doing, and willing and able to support our projects in any way, you know, that they could, just very enthusiastic and supportive. And very friendly, and it was like you got dropped out of an airplane somewhere and had like a whole community of friends and helpful people around you. And that was like just such a luxurious perk of being in Vicksburg. So other things that have been really great about kind of envisioning this project as being based here in Vicksburg is that there's all this history. People have worked really hard to hang on to the history and the documentation. There are people you just casually meet around town all the time who have a story or some kind of romantic memory of the mill itself. And so there's a lot of ripe kind of first-person research opportunities for solving problems and envisioning what things will look like and what kind of actions are taken based on the research that is just everywhere available here. This history of using milkweed floss for buoyant flotation devices comes from World War II, in which children mostly foraged the milkweed pods voluntarily for these life vests. And that effort was a national effort, but it was focused in Western Michigan. And one woman, Nancy Lowe, who lives in town and is 83, came to the opening and heard me talking about the milkweed and said, I did that. Yeah, when we were kids, we gathered these for life vests for the war. And I was like, oh, I've been like looking on the ground level for somebody, just talking about this project out loud for a while, thinking I'll find someone. And she was the first person I found. And coincidentally, her father worked at the mill, was like a manager of some section of it. And so, you know, those kinds of being in such a relevant site-specific area, not just because it's industrial, not just because it's post-industrial, but also because it's in Western Michigan, gives me all these opportunities to kind of like activate my project in a broader way and have inspiration and help that's relevant. So, this sword is a buoy. I carved it out of maple when I was at Haystack. And while I was here, I drilled the tip full of holes and put fishing weights, lead fishing weights in there, and sealed it up with wood filler. So the idea is that because this is buoyant but the tip is heavy, I'm hoping that when I put it in the water, the tip will point down. It'll kind of bob like this, I hope. And it's modeled kind of like on an Excalibur sword. The idea is like a character could pull it out of the water like the sword in the stone, like kind of unsheath it from the lake.